Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Another live stream with Trotec. Another Laser Live. Good things. It's another happy Friday to everyone. So glad to have you all here with us on the stream. If you're watching either now or on YouTube later on down the line, very happy to have you here with us. I'm joined by Tim once again this week. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Excited.
Good. Tim's going to be running some cool stuff for us on the SpeedMarker today. How's your week, man?
It's been good. It's a 4-day work week, so
true.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
I gotta say it is pouring rain today, so typically I rely a lot on the natural light that I have coming in through the giant window next to me. But today, I'm relying on like several desk lights and things. So if my face starts to be like lit like a Hitchcock movie halfway through,
you look great. Why. Come on, no, you look great.
You, sir.
I have this like little giant window here, so I have this half side thing going on. It's raining here too, but still, the lighting here is just never going to be good.
That's true. That's true. Well, you know what? It's always a beautiful day when you're joined by someone as talented as Leanne and Tim. How are you, Leanne?
I'm doing very well. It's also a little rainy here, so I have all my studio fluorescent lights and one skylight. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, yeah. For anyone who isn't familiar with Leanne, we've done a video with her in the past on the YouTube channel that I think maybe Lev is going to be able to pop up kind of intermittently throughout the stream here today. But Leanne is from Made You Look in downtown Toronto. Do you want to tell us just like a little bit about the business? Just sort of like if somebody is walking down the street, what's like that first introductory like, oh, hey, this seems cool. What's Made You Look all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the name too. Like if you're walking down on the street, the whole point of the store is, to make you look. We have an amazing window display, and our main focus is jewelry. Yeah, there's a video right there. We've been in Parkdale for over 20 years. We're at Queen and Dufferin in downtown Toronto, and we specialize in all types of jewelry at every price point and every material. And we also focus a lot on wedding and engagement things in the last few years. So that's been really exciting. But we also, one thing that sets us apart from a lot of other jewelry stores in Toronto is that we actually have over 25 in-house designers in the studio making the work that you see on the floor, and then another 100 more local designers selling their work here as well. So I'm in the studio right now. I'm in the back room with my laser here. But this is also our machinery room. So you might see a couple of designers coming in and out a little bit. Because we're always working here.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's just a sign of a bustling business. That's
yeah.
I have to say too, like when you were saying, yeah, you're in the back part of the studio with the fluorescence and stuff. Like I didn't even notice it was fluorescence. Like when you're in Made You Look, as you guys can see here from the video, if you've never been to the store, I mean, if you ever have the chance, definitely it's worth your while. But you can even see like even in the studio space, this is sort of that we're touring here. This is the room that Leanne is in, I believe. Even in their like back room, like fluorescent space, it's beautiful. Do you know what I mean? That like you're still surrounded by gorgeous items everywhere you look. I have to say also, we were very fortunate that when we got to come through Made You Look, Liane and the owner, Sarah, were able to give us a quick tour of the space. And so I kind of want to come back around to that, but it is going to come up pretty quick here in the video. And it's one of the coolest things is like that sort of basement area. Where you have, again, like more designers working, you have like a metalsmith on site. When you say you have 25 like designers working like in the store, I mean, I know you said you kind of work in all areas, but like, can you give us kind of an idea of like what a typical, if somebody wants to come to Made You Look, you kind of can do anything. I get the feeling like there's a little bit of,
Yeah, we definitely try to be a one-stop shop for anything that's jewelry related or even metal related. We do a lot of non-jewelry things as well. But in-house, among our 25 designers, we also have one master goldsmith who does almost all our repairs and anything finicky that might need to happen, we have another goldsmith in training who's doing that as well. We have a CAD specialist, so computer aided design, for any 3D printing and model making that we need. We have 2 setters. We have a laser welder. We have another type of laser that does like those permanent bracelets that become really popular. We're getting an appraiser soon. We have a lapidary artist. We have someone who works with wood, someone who works with titanium. We do literally anything at all possible, and we're always trying to bring in more people and learn new things. And that's kind of like how I got onto the laser and how we brought the laser in, because we just wanted to make sure we had almost everything we need here, not only for our clients, but also our makers who work out of the space.
Totally. Well, yeah, that's kind of, I mean, I think everybody can tell that I'm pretty excited to have Leanne on today. I think like, not only was Made You Look the first video I ever shot for Trotec, so it has like a special place in my heart for that reason, but I also think it is probably one of the coolest, I want to say like local businesses. It seems like such a staple of Toronto now that it almost feels like a big business to me. But sometimes I forget that it was sort of started by like one person who, like, as I understand, Sarah went to school for jewelry design herself and then sort of realized there wasn't like a centralized place for jewelers to be able to sell their work. Is that sort of, am I right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Sarah started in the George Brown program with a bunch of the other artists who are still here, actually. And then she realized just before graduating, she's like, "What are we going to do when we get out of here? Like, where is there a space for us to?" That's similar to the school studio where everyone's working together and collaborating and sharing ideas and learning from each other. There, at that point, and that was again over 20 years ago, there wasn't anything in Toronto like that. And so Made You Look, in its inception, was the springboard for a lot of the other studios that have a similar vibe now. And we're happy to spread that love around the city as well. But Sarah just wanted a place for creatives to come together and learn and grow together.
I mean, she succeeded.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
If you guys aren't, yeah, if you're not following Made You Look on Instagram, you guys are missing out. I have to tell you, as Lev is showing here, Made You Look Jewelry, it is gorgeous. And the thing I cannot stress enough is just the variety of stuff that comes out of the studio. Every time I've ever visited, I think part of what's so interesting about it is that every designer clearly has their own voice. And by having this like special place where they can all show their own work, they don't feel obliged, it seems like, to conform necessarily to what is popular or what is on a trend. They really can continue to express like their own style, right? They can kind of have their own sort of special thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly amazed too by the type of work that is coming in, the designers who want to showcase their work here. Like I said, we have probably close to 150 designers at this point, and every designer has their own kind of look and specialty and feel. Like we do our best to curate what comes in, and there's little to no overlap in the designers that we have at the store. So as you can see in these images here, we have all sorts of materials and done in all sorts of ways, and we're just very proud of our collection for sure.
100%, very well deserved. I mean, let's talk a little bit about you, if that's okay. So did you also come from the George Brown School? I mean, you studied jewelry design, is my understanding, but
I did, yeah.
How did you kind of get introduced to Made You Look? How did you come into the team? And, I'd love to start to talk about kind of your style.
Yeah, thank you. I came from the OCAD side, actually. So in Toronto, there's the 2 major jewelry programs are at OCAD and at George Brown. So about half of us are George Brown and about half of us are OCAD, and there's a few overlaps as well. But definitely always loved jewelry. And actually at OCAD University, we had various Trotec machines. That's how I got introduced to the brand itself. And kind of working with various, now I'm hungry looking at those burgers. And just like working with not necessarily a laser engraver for a metal there, but using the laser cutters for various other materials. And then after graduating from OCAD, it was kind of a similar thing. Like, where can I go to work with other people? Where can I go where I can use a studio space? And also, where can I sell my own work? And Made You Look kind of fitted all those check boxes right there. So when I first started working here, I was actually working on the floor doing retail and customer service. And that's where I kind of saw the gap in between customers coming in looking for our services, and us, if we couldn't do it in-house, we'd have to use a third-party vendor. And luckily we're in Toronto, so we have almost all our suppliers local to us. If not within the area, then within like a 20-minute drive away. But it still created some issues with, bringing laser engraving in and pushing it out. But before we get to that part, since we're looking at my work here.
I was going to ask, there's a few pieces here in particular I'm really keen to ask about. Leanne Best Designs, if you guys also, I mean, absolutely worth a follow, 100%. You can see it there on the screen, but check out Leanne's work on Instagram. She does some gorgeous stuff.
Thank you. And it's being at Made You Look that kind of helped me foster my style and create a niche for myself. Because obviously, like I said, we want to create our own individual styles, even though we're all working together in the same space. And being inspired by what everyone else is doing. Some people were at the same point of their career as me. Some have been here by the time I got here for 10, 15 years. There was always things that I could learn and teach to everyone. So my style kind of grew and was fostered by the space because everyone here is so supportive and communicative, and there's absolutely no competition. We're all here to kind of support each other in our work, which can be hard since we're all literally we're making jewelry, we're making necklaces, rings, earrings, like it's all the same thing, but we're all, our target markets may be different, and that's kind of where we can meet together and support each other. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely I owe a lot of my success to being here for the last 6 years for sure.
Well, I think you kind of touched on some really important points there too that I think so I went to school for advertising marketing principally. And I kind of faced a similar challenge when I got out of school, which was, in the school studio space, you have ample software, computers, machines, technology, all the stuff that you need around you. But when you get out into sort of the workforce, you can find yourself sort of in a position, how do you promote yourself without all of the sort of, the things that you've grown accustomed to having, quick access to at school kind of thing. And then also, in a similar position where, I'm surrounded by 30 to 40 people who basically want the same job that I do. But at the same time, you can't help but be inspired by, being around other creative people. I think it just kind of naturally happens. There's that old kind of adage about like great artists and, inspiration and stealing and But realistically, I think at the end of the day, it's just more that's how the artistic brain works. It's just kind of, it's taking in things all the time. And then inevitably it just kind of eventually coalesces into something that's like new and different and cool.
That's the goal.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, so I should mention too, really quickly, for anyone who is watching, who is joining us slightly late, Leanne is here from Made You Look. If you guys have any questions at all in terms of, process any of the stuff you see in Leanne's work, particularly, I think this is a really cool opportunity for anyone, particularly who's interested in using a fiber laser, a SpeedMarker, or for doing jewelry design in particular, to ask somebody who really knows what they're talking about. We're also going to have Tim in the background doing some engraving on rings, and so we're going to get Tim to pipe in here in a little bit. I think I'm going to ask him some questions about how he's doing it, because it's certainly like a tricky, in terms of setting something up for engraving, a ring can be really tricky. But I want to quickly ask you about the work that we've been scrolling through here on your Instagram. Would you say that you do more in the way of sort of, gosh, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, like new pieces from scratch that you're sort of designing or creating either, on your own or with your customer? Or is it more like heirloom pieces that you're restoring or sort of adapting in a modern kind of way?
I would say it's about 50-50 right now, especially, what I hope is coming out of the pandemic in the last 2 years. There has been that influx of people wanting to rework their old jewelry into new things. That's always something that we've done for the past 2 decades, but kind of like peaked a little bit in the last 2 years since a lot of other things weren't happening. Obviously, weddings were at a standstill. We do a lot of wedding engagement, as I mentioned. So definitely a lot of heirloom reworking, or here's some gold, melt it down. What can we make out of it kind of situation. And then again, a lot of custom, totally from scratch. If someone were to come into the studio, we have our showcases everywhere, and anything can be a jumping off point to make something from scratch, like, oh, I really like that ring, but I want it to be in rose gold instead of yellow, and I want the center stone to be purple instead of white. And then also people come in and they email us photos and bring in other things. They're like, can you help me find this or make this thing? And the answer is usually yes, we can.
Yes. Well, because I was curious, like as a designer, is it the same sort of set of questions or the same sort of challenges that go through your mind when you're restoring or transforming an heirloom as designing something from scratch, or is it like a totally separate process?
It is definitely a totally separate process. I will say that starting from scratch is usually much easier.
Really?
There are a lot of things we have to consider when working with jewelry that we didn't make or I didn't make or were made in a different era altogether. Like jewelry that's made now can be made a little differently than jewelry that was made in the 1920s. So if it's a case of, fixing a setting or changing the style of something, we'd have to really do a lot of detective work to see kind of what the material is, what's the is anything about to break, or are we in danger of not being totally sure of what this is comprised out of, and therefore not working with it in the way that it needs to be worked with. So I would say definitely reworking old jewelry and working with heirloom pieces has its own kind of set of difficulties. And then with custom work also, it can also be hard for some people to kind of really visualize something that they haven't held in their hands and they haven't seen and they can't try on, right? Because a lot of that beginning work is just sketches and drawings and talking about things and maybe showing examples. But if it's a totally unique custom piece, it requires a lot of trust in the client in our work as well.
Well, and that was kind of what I wanted to ask, is because so when we first started doing the laser jams, like this sort of interview session chats like this, one of the questions we used to ask people is, what is that one amazing thing that you've ever engraved? Like, what's the craziest thing you've ever done, right? And I think you have a really interesting sort of scenario in that, like, not only have you probably engraved some, like, probably more than most one-of-one pieces, right? But then on top of that also,
Definitely.
you're kind of faced with that each day. Like there's sort of, a ring made of a precious metal or something isn't something that you can just, oh yeah, let me just whip up like a basic like version of it and we'll see, let me just grab my, like even that you said, like somebody would come in and be like, oh, here's some gold, let's melt it down. Like who has just the gold sitting in the corner of the living room and being like,
You'd be surprised.
We should take that in. Yeah, we should really take that into Major Look and see if they could do something with it. But you know what I mean? Like, I think it's a really interesting set of challenges because, as you said, like when you're going to school for design, are you also having to learn about like not only sheer just like, design from the aesthetic sense, but then also like here are all the different metals that you might use and here are the compounds and here are how, you have to structure them in order that they don't break and they do retain their strength and stuff like that. Like it seems like a really interesting set of disciplines that you kind of have to know a little bit.
For sure. I mean, like, and OCAD definitely had to teach us that we need to know how to work with our materials, and I guess like I've been using the word designer a lot. That is what we are, but a lot of us are the majority of us are makers as well, and there's a huge difference between someone who's just a designer and someone who designs and makes jewelry. A lot of the time you can design something and without knowing the metal's properties or the material's properties, what you're designing may not actually work in real life. We have to consider a lot of things like tolerances for how thin the metal can go in this area. If I'm setting stones, I need to allow enough space to do this setting versus this setting. There's a lot of other things that come into play, and knowing your materials is a huge benefit in being someone who designs and makes things.
Totally. So I literally couldn't have a better segue if we had scripted it ahead of time. Speaking of materials, speaking of the materials that you have to know and work with, I'm curious. So as I understand it, and I know there are probably other people at Major Look that use the laser, but are you kind of the principal person using the laser sort of within the staff? And then I'm curious kind of how, because you said when you were at OCAD, you were principally using, I assume, a CO2 laser, and now you guys have a SpeedMarker, like a galvo. So I'm curious, what that process of like learning the galvo was like, and then also, what are the materials that you're working with on the galvo? Because we get questions about jewelry engraving all the time, but we're always very hesitant for anybody who isn't like an expert. You know, can you do gold? Can you do silver? Like, well, call Leanne, please.
And actually, I have gotten a lot of people after that YouTube video that you guys did for us was posted. We did get a lot of calls and emails directly to the store about, I saw your video online and I have a few questions about like how things are done. And like obviously happy to answer all those questions, but definitely never even used a laser myself until we got this one at the studio. So it was definitely a pretty big learning curve, and obviously we wanted to get started right away. So it was about I would say maybe less than a week of really just playing around and fiddling and doing a lot of samples on different things. That being said, there are still times where someone brings something in, I'm just like, I guess we're gonna
I know that
I guess we'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
And it can get tricky, and we have to kind of explain to our clients, like, I have never engraved this specific thing or this specific plating on this metal before. If you're okay with it coming out, you know, a slightly different color than we think it might be, like, I'll do it, but you have to be, you know, flexible with what you think is going to happen. Obviously, if it's something for me or designers, we kind of are like, yeah, let's just give it a go and see. But when it's different when it's a client.
Absolutely.
But yeah, definitely just like played around a lot with the machine in that first week, and then every project was a learning experience. But obviously, it's been like, I think 4 years now having this machine, and I feel pretty good on it.
I mean, I have to say, the work even that you were doing, you know, 2-3 years ago when we came to shoot the video was pretty great. I mean, I'm curious. So we have a few questions for you from the chat here, but I had one that Lev even threw to me, and I think it's a great question, is, you know, if you were speaking with someone who was not a jewelry designer, so just like a general, you know, used laser, let's say a little bit like a general engraver kind of person, how difficult or how easy would you say it is to learn specifically engraving for jewelry? Like you were talking about the learning curve there, leaving aside the question of like, you know, obviously you don't want to mess up on a piece that's, you know, in a precious metal, but like how difficult is that learning curve for just learning kind of jewelry engraving in particular, would you say, for somebody maybe who has, you know, a little bit of familiarity with the laser kind of?
I would say it's I don't want to say it's an impossible thing to learn, but it definitely has so many intricacies that one wouldn't even think of until it's time to do that thing.
Sure.
Like actually just 2 days ago, one of the goldsmiths in the studio asked me if I could do like a multi-layered engraving to mimic the look of hand engraving for a coat of arms on silver. And I had never done that. So I was like, hey, we will, you know, set out a sample and we'll try it out. So there's always things to learn, but I would say knowing if you're not a goldsmith or you're not a jeweler and you have little to no experience with metals, just having a ton of like sample metals available, and also kind of listening and watching the machine as it works will tell you a lot about how the laser is interacting with that metal. So something I found out pretty early on actually is I can use a similar setting for most of the precious metals, so white gold, yellow gold, platinum, but rose gold interacts entirely different than the others because of the copper content. It sounds different. It looks different when the laser is hitting it, like the sparks or the green that's coming off of it when looking through the screen. It looks entirely different on rose gold. So from seeing that, I had to go in and like tinker the settings and figure out kind of if I make it stronger this way, if I increase the speed, how can I get it to the same point as when I'm working with the other metals. So it's a lot of just like listening and looking and just kind of, yeah, playing around.
That's so. You're the first person I've ever heard say that there is like an audio component.
Oh, for sure. Like, yeah, even engraving titanium sounds so different from engraving silver or brass, and I have to, you know, yeah, it's just like gotta pay attention to the details, I guess.
I mean, sure, yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense. So just out of curiosity, then, like, you said that you can use kind of similar settings for most of the precious metals. when you started out then, was it sort of principally just that trial and error of like, hey, I know I want to get usually like a dark, like the one that's on the screen here, like that is a beautiful engraving, I would argue. Like the contrast is really, really beautiful and you know, stands well apart. But you know, trying to get that perfect kind of like dark black result is not as easy as just like, yeah, punch in like silver and away you go. Like how did you come to that perfect setting? Was it just sort of trial and error, like a matrix sort of thing? Was it, you know, just gradually year over year getting a little bit closer and closer and closer, or you know, what was that process like?
I mean, I'm not gonna say we cheat sometimes, but we definitely do cheat sometimes. Like what's good about working with precious metals is that we have a host of patinas, we call them, that we can apply to the metal and then clean them up. That darkens the engraving really nicely. It's basically like liver of sulfur or Jax is usually the solutions we use. So that gets applied to the metal and then the surface is cleaned off, and basically the engraved recesses is where all that blackening stays. So that is kind of what we do in that sense. But oftentimes, sometimes, especially with steel or any sort of plated steel, there is a little bit of trial and error in terms of how many passes will it take to get a consistent dark color if that is what the client wants. I do a lot of non-jewelry related work. I actually have a pile of flasks sitting next to me that I'm going to be working on as soon as I'm done here with you guys. So when I first started doing those, it was like, okay, if I do one pass, it's going to come out a really light gray color. But if I go up to 3 or 4, it creates a lot of like really nice contrast between the engraving and the steel. So kind of just seeing where that middle ground is through time and through various projects doing a similar thing.
I was going to ask, because it is like a question that we get a lot, obviously, right? Is about, you know, material settings and workflow. And, you know, it's a to be expected kind of thing, right? It makes perfect sense. But even you can see, so Tim working on a ring here and getting the Trotec there engraved on the outside. That looks really nice, Tim, actually. Are those just blanks from like Amazon? Those ones, those are stainless steel, I think, right?
They are labeled titanium.
I would have guessed titanium too.
Yeah, but they are blanks from Amazon. Yes.
Oh, they're labeled titanium. See, this is why I have to have you guys on. That's so cool. That's so funny that you're able to just see it and be like, "It looks like titanium."
It looks like
titanium. Yeah, Leanne watching Iron Man being like, looks more like sulfur dioxide to me. I am questioning though, like we had the question earlier also from Doug for, you know, figuring out the settings when engraving different metals. Are you comfortable to sort of maybe at some point here I'll email Leanne afterward. I don't want her to have to go check her machine and see what the power and speed settings and things are.
Oh yeah.
I'll see if I can get like a secret sauce from her and maybe put it in the comments of this video or the description of the video. But I'm curious if you know, if just off the top of your head, if you could give us a rundown of like, what are those outlier metals? Like you said, like most of the precious metals kind of a similar setting, but what are those ones that are outside? So there's like rose gold is different, steel and titanium, I guess, are a little bit different.
Yeah, platinum is a little different too. It's a super dense metal, so it takes longer to get to a similar depth as like when comparing to the golds. And then anything that's plated is super, super tricky. That's when you have to drop the speed a lot, drop the power a lot. Because if you go too hard, too fast, like the plating can flake, or it'll be like a really uneven coloring throughout. So especially like when you're engraving someone else's work, that you don't want to disappoint them, obviously. And even engraving things that can't be refinished by us. So sometimes customer will come in with a gold ring. Hey, I want this engraved. We'll engrave it and then we'll give it a quick polish just to make it look really nice. You can't do that with plated items. You can't do that with anything that is a material that we don't know. Like we don't know what grade the steel on this flask is. So I'm not going to go ahead and refinish it if I don't know what it's made from, because it could make the situation worse. But basically when I started working with the machine, it had the setting for brass already in there. So that's kind of where I started. And just knowing the materiality of brass compared to other materials, that's kind of how I played with the power settings. So brass has a higher power setting than silver because silver is a softer metal than brass is. So just intuitively, again, like knowing your materials, knowing how they work, helped me figure out all the different settings here. Titanium is an industrial metal. Speed has to go much higher. Power has to go much higher. I usually do a couple more cleaning passes on titanium than I would with other metals, just because it is a different monster altogether. But yeah, just knowing the materials and how they respond to like a base metal that you want to start off with.
That's really cool. I have a question for the both of you, actually, both yourself and Tim. I'll start with you, Leanne, because it's directed straight to you. And Tanya asked some great questions in our stream last week, I believe it was too. So I appreciate you coming back, Tanya. How do you center the engraving on the ring perfectly each time?
Are we talking about? Oh, I guess I'll go through the if we do rotary and flat. You
do rings flat?
I mean, it depends on the ring, right? If it's a signet ring where it just has the flat top, or
right.
If
okay.
I
thought you were like a wizard. I was like, so.
I mean, actually, no. Sometimes, like with like a top heavy ring. So like, Tim's engraving bands right now, and obviously we do a lot of bands too. Well, we're a unique jewelry store. We have a lot of unique rings. So we have a lot of rings that are weird shapes, and sometimes they have to be done not in the rotary jig. They have to be done kind of flat and angled. Like for example, on a like a signet ring, where the top is the oval, and then it has like really wide shoulders. If I'm engraving the side, if I angle the jig too far, the engraving itself might come out a bit slanted. So what I'll do is I'll engrave the underside of the top part flat upside down on the bed, as opposed to putting it in the jig and engraving it
that makes sense
on the band part. But yeah, so I mean, if I'm doing it flat, I'll use a positioning shape, put it on the positioning layer, and center everything that way with a lot of, just using the program itself and using positioning and centering. In terms of using it on the rotary machine, that is much trickier. And for an engraving that will take all of 20 seconds to actually work, sometimes it'll take me like 5-10 minutes just setting it up, if not more than that, depending on how complicated it is. But my trick, especially for things that are not plated, is using Sharpie on the ring itself. So coloring it with Sharpie, lining it up, and then hit a cleaning pass. And what that will do is just remove the Sharpie itself and not hit the metal at all. So I can kind of see where what the engraving will look like, where it is, and if I need to position it differently in any way. Because sometimes with really high polished surfaces, the marking laser, like the red cross, won't even show up because it's so high polished. It just like literally reflects right off. Sometimes I just like won't even know where the marking is. So I'll use Sharpie, or I'll use a piece of masking tape and just kind of cover it, and
That's a good trick.
Yeah. And just kind of like clean the Sharpie off and not touch the metal at all.
So many bottles I've ruined. I saw Tim too. You were, I think we're using kind of like the positioning pass, but you will sometimes use like the piece of paper or the.
Yeah.
Is that to increase the visibility of the?
Exactly. Yeah, because the titanium is very reflective, especially on the inside. The outside itself looks like it was brushed, but the inside is just polished, and I can't see a single part of the laser. Even the focusing is very, very difficult to do. So I take a piece of sticky note, just curl it up against the inside, and then same thing on the outside, just get it all curled up so I could see where it is. It is a bit difficult that way. Masking tape would be much more effective, but then I have to constantly move back and forth. So just for the sake of the purpose, just quick paper in and out.
Yep. I have to say too, I think you touched on something that's like, I don't know, it might be a joke for two, but like at the end of the day, I don't know if people who don't get to work with lasers understand the incredible, like, you guys get to see Tim doing it during a stream like this, where he spends like 10 minutes doing the setup to make sure that it's exactly perfect. But the thing only engraves for 10 seconds. Like, there's no, like, that you know what I mean? It's all this buildup, and then it's just like, nah. You know what I mean? One thing I will say too, Lev was showing off the piece earlier on your Instagram that I think is so cool. It's and something I really would encourage people to look at is so I mean, this wasn't the one I was going to pull up, but I did want to ask if so thank you, Lev. Was this one laser cut, or is that like?
Yep.
Really?
That's laser cut. Yeah. That's it's brass. I've laser cut brass, sterling silver, steel, aluminum, all the carat golds, including rose gold, which was tricky. I have not tried laser cutting platinum yet. But yeah, and I have not laser cut titanium, but everything else I have.
Wow.
That being said, obviously there are limitations. Like, I don't cut anything that's thicker than 1 millimeter, which is fine for jewelry because everything's so small scale. 0.75, 0.8 is the sweet spot. But yeah, definitely possible. I did it.
I will say, like, we tend to say not possible only because most people want to do stuff that is like thick, right? Or they're typically thinking, and most laser cutting, if somebody's seen laser cutting metal on like YouTube before, it's a machine specifically built for like metal cutting, right? Like a big, powerful. That's really gorgeous. I didn't realize that was brass. I was ready for you to tell me, like, yeah, it's this gorgeous, like, reflective acrylic or something. I mean,
we give our clients two options. Like, we have the laser cut version, which is, we say it's cheaper and more economical, or we have the carved version where we go in and either 3D print like their name necklace or their whatever, or carve it out of wax and cast it. And that obviously takes more time. It is more expensive. So having these two options, depending on what the client is looking for, do they want something like with a fast turnaround, or they want something a bit more durable that's going to be like an heirloom piece that's going to be passed down. Like those are kind of like where we sit those two options in.
That makes sense. So really quickly, a quick question about, would this come? Yeah. So Lev was asking about where do you buy the plates, but then also, so would this be cut just from like a little, like a sheet of brass, like a really thin sheet of
the literal sheet of brass?
Because I'm thinking like, even wheat. That's cool. Wow.
And then like for the silver, actually, I'm gonna show you this because it is kind of cool. Sometimes I look at it myself and I'm like, haha.
My job is really cool.
yeah, like that's my piece of silver that I have like all my cutouts, so I can kind of see like what I've done.
Oh, that's wicked.
Just by like looking at the like extra pieces of metal.
It's actually one of my favorite
parts. I have like a huge bag of things, just like with all the different cutouts.
Always save your scraps, you guys. Always save your material scraps.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite parts of that initial video that we shot is the bed. The bed of your galvo is marked up with all sorts of really cool designs and things where like you guys were either testing or doing something and it like has hit the bed of the galvo and it's all marked in. Quick question about do you know the wattage of that SpeedMarker behind you?
It's a SpeedMarker 300. I don't know if that tells you the wattage.
I want to say it's like 20 or 30 watt possibly. We could probably look it up, but it's just a regular SpeedMarker 300. That is the machine you're using to cut the one right behind you.
Same one.
Right?
It's the only laser engraver / cutter that we have.
Or that you need.
Wow.
Sorry, it's built in. I can't help it. Quick question for Tim, really fast. We were talking about the positioning pass on the laser. Would you be able to sort of define like what that is and how it works, like with SpeedMark?
For me, I do one positioning mark, so it's not even hitting the F12. I think it's the F10 button. So putting in my squares, seeing where everything is. And then if I'm happy with that, then if I need to, I'll do the Sharpie, and then I'll do the cleaning pass, which I'm not sure if it's built into all, but for us, it was the red layer when changing kind of the settings. So I have like my engraving layer and I have my cleaning layer. And then the engraving layer is black, the cleaning layer is red. I'm not sure if it was already there when I set up my machine. It's just like a lower speed, lower power, and it's just a super light cleaning pass that just takes off the Sharpie.
Sweet. Tim, you were gonna say like, you were gonna. Are you using like the? I'm trying to remember what the terminology is, but there's one that's like an outline of the actual engraving. There's one that just shows like a square that roughly says like, hey, here's kind of.
Yeah.
Right. So with the Rotary, I believe it just shows the crosshair of where everything's going to be. So I will measure the ring that I'm working with. I'll take calipers, measure the working space that I have. I'll take the word that I'm using. I'll make sure that the height fit on the actual band. I'll make sure that the length is not warping in any weird way.
Right.
And then I'll throw it in, press F9, have everything scale correctly. It'll show up how it's looking. I'll make sure everything is nicely put. Then just press F12. And I also have a cleaning pass as well. So I like to make sure that everything's neatly done afterwards. So just like you mentioned, I use the red layer as well. Just got basics. Yeah.
Don't fix what ain't broken.
Exactly.
So another question about cutting metal. This is a good one. How many passes typically to cut metal? How long does it take? Like, let's say roughly, like ballpark.
Yeah, it does depend on the material and the thickness and what the shape is. So if it's like that Dolly Parton necklace, for example, I cut that out of 1mm brass, and I believe it was 175 passes. And it took maybe half an hour or less. I want to say less than half an hour, maybe like 20 minutes.
Man, I know what I'm doing this afternoon.
I found a piece of brass here to cut.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure our brass might even be thicker than 1mm, but I'm not. Now I gotta go check.
I just measured it, 0.75. We're good.
See, Leanne, okay.
I'm so excited for you.
You're ready for some competition.
I've tried cutting it before, actually. This is done at 100 power with, I think, 300 speed. It didn't get right through it. But it's very close. I can feel the metal just bulging out if I try to bend the sheet a bit.
And do you know how many passes you did on that?
It's 100 passes.
Yeah.
Just do it 100.
Yeah. Do more.
Exactly.
Do more.
Only one way to go from here.
Exactly.
There was a pizza we were showing earlier where you took someone's custom illustration and transformed it into, I believe it was a pendant, like a necklace.
Yeah.
I was curious because I don't know if necessarily people realize, like, if you're not familiar with laser, if you're familiar with laser, you realize like basically anything that can be vectorized can typically be laser engraved in some way, right? But I always think like one of the coolest projects I've ever seen was a couple years ago. It was one of the first people who asked me about taking like their child's drawing and putting it on like a cutting board. In this case, I think it was, right? But like,
I don't know if you can tell right here. I have a child's drawing.
Cool.
So cool.
And Nicolas Cage, of course.
That's I mean, you gotta, But like, that's one of those things that like I would like more people to know about, because I think it's such a like, from your perspective, I don't wager that it's too tough to do. I want to ask you about how hard it is to kind of do because I'm familiar with doing a portrait like that, let's say with like job control or with like the typical CO2 laser, but with a SpeedMarker, I'm curious, how it's done. And then also, I just love how personal it is, right? Obviously, like, especially in in a world like with jewelry where each piece is going to be, is going to be usually pretty meaningful to the person, I assume. But I just think it's such a great idea, such a beautiful execution, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially like you said, especially with jewelry is already such a personal, sentimental object, and just adding an engraving, no matter what it is, just like takes it to that next level. So we always see an uptick for engravings, obviously around Christmas time, but Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, all those gift giving seasons. So not just inside, wedding bands, but like you said, like pet memorials. So engraving like a pet's face onto a piece, a lot of drawings. My all-time favorite thing to do, and I get emotional every time I have to do it, is like handwriting engraving. So taking like old cards, old letters, whatever and kind of like vectorizing them and engraving them into pieces. There's one project that I did where a client brought in like a stack of old letters that her grandparents had written to each other when they were like younger, and kind of like picked words here and there and created a whole new type of letter based on like different words from each of these letters, and created this amazing memorial piece for them. And it was just like, oh, it was the best.
See, oh yeah, that I think is incredible. I'm sorry, I'm reading some of these messages in chat too.
And then,
like,
yeah, fingerprints, sound waves.
drawings.
I've done sound waves too, for sure.
Yeah, heartbeats, like
Yeah.
that's amazing stuff. And yet I think like this is why it's so important to come see someone like Leanne or one of the really talented designers at Made You Look, because they can take anything that you can bring them and help you turn it into something that is beautiful. Like I'm pretty sure that next image on the profile there is like lemon slices.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. But that's really cool though. This is why, man, I don't know. Designers deserve so much respect, not only for like, you forget how much of the things that you interact with every single day had to have somebody think about, not only how it works, but then, how they're going to make it, comfortable and convenient for you, and like make it memorable and make it special and all that stuff. Sorry, I just get lost scrolling through this Instagram.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have checked out the Made You Look engraving hashtag on Instagram, but that has like kind of everyone's. So not just my work, but like the work I've done for the designers. Oh, I meant to mention this, but I am one of two people who use the laser engraving machines. It's just me and my one other coworker, Alistair, who moonlights for me when I'm unavailable. But it is easier actually for just kind of like a small group of people to use the machine, because it is so technical and is so specific. And obviously it's easier for the designer to kind of be like, can you do this for me? And continue on with their life.
Well, and it makes you irreplaceable, right? It's like, Leanne is like, Leanne is the go-to person. You know what I mean? I have to say too, don't underestimate. Like, we had a few questions ahead of the stream that I wanted to throw Leanne, but a lot of them kind of came around this idea of engraving on the inside of a ring, like you see there. Definitely don't underestimate what can be done with a laser in terms of, we sort of talked about like there might be a lot of setup time, there might be a lot of sort of pre-work to get things ready, but you really can do a little bit of just about anything. Wow, that's a lot of holy smokes.
So I recently just finished up, not recently, it feels like recently because it took so long, but recently did maybe 2,000 of these.
Wow. Like trophies, little cups?
They're lovely. They're little jiggers. So they're for a gin company, Empress Gin, that's based out of Vancouver.
Oh.
And they kind of just like want to do things local and not mass produced. They send a lot of their stuff through us to have little old me engrave their logo on things and then send them out.
That's awesome. Wow. They really look standout too. See, man, I know I say this every week, but like, this is what I love so much about laser engraving, is that you can take any object and make it just a little bit special. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can take an object and turn it from, something that can already be special, or something that is very basic, like a flask or like a cup, and turn it into like, no, now it's like Leanne's cup. Do you know what I mean? Like, now it's not just any cup. We had a few, so my girlfriend and I have been fortunate enough to pick up a few things from Made You Look here and there throughout the years, and we had them design one of the designers there did a split ring for us. And it really is like a cool experience. Like, buying jewelry or buying something special is always like a really fun thing, but like getting something that is like custom designed is one of one, really is like a special experience. You know what I mean? There's kind of nothing like it. It's like buying a bespoke suit, right? Like, nothing's going to fit you better. Nothing's going to be more what you wanted. Like, it's exactly what you're hoping for, kind of thing.
And like, obviously we engrave like what we can that comes to the door. It doesn't have to be our piece of jewelry that's from the studio for us to engrave it. So even if someone does go buy something that is mass produced and brings it in for us to engrave, that is how they can get a one-of-a-kind personalized piece as well, right?
So somewhere in my desk, I just recently set up a new desk in this room, so I don't know exactly where it is, but I have just an absolute piece of garbage ring that I bought from like an Aldo. But then like a little signet ring with like a flat top, but then I engraved it and made it like oh, now it's like my
Yeah.
piece of junk. You know what I mean? So that was really, really cool. I did want to ask Tim, if I'm not mistaken, is this your first or like one of the very first times you've ever used the Rotary in the SpeedMarker?
Yeah, this has been my first 2 hours.
Holy crap. How are you? Okay,
Nice.
how are you finding it? I'm so curious because
Well, since I've been using the galvo extensively,
okay.
so the added rotary was a bit confusing at first, but with some experience with the galvo, I know how the software works. Thankfully, I know how some metals react to the galvo. So fitting everything in, focusing it all, adjusting any angle on the actual rotary itself, surprisingly, as intimidating as it looks, it's really not that hard. Because full disclosure, I started doing this at 10 o'clock today. So
Doing great, Tim. Damn.
it's
right.
great. Yeah, it's nice and easy to use.
I have to say, we had a question earlier too about like the galvo, or pardon me, the rotary, and whether that could be adapted to a lot of different machines. I always find the rotary really intimidating, but once you're kind of used to it, I assume, like Leanne, when you're setting something up to engrave flat or setting something up to engrave using the rotary, do you find it any trickier one way or the other? Is there an added level of difficulty with the rotary, or is it just kind of like, yeah, business as usual now?
For the rotary, it only gets difficult if something is not completely round. So like I said, like any sort of engagement ring that has a bunch of stones on top, or like a really chunky signet ring, like bands are super, super easy. Like those jiggers that you saw before, they're pretty simple to do. It's just when it gets like to be a really weird shape and one side is bigger than the other, that's when it gets into that like 20-minute setup time for like 10 seconds up engraving time.
Brutal.
Yeah.
I was going to ask too, so you mentioned earlier about a designer asking you about doing like a multi-layered piece using the laser, right? So doing something that had like different levels of depth. I was going to ask Tim, like, not to put you on the spot, but if you were trying to set up something like that, like what would be your kind of go-to suggestion? Because my first thinking is kind of like a relief style engraving, right? Where you can do different levels of black to get like different depths at different points. But it's easy for me to just say that and then be like, go to it. Like, I don't,
Right. I mean, off of my guess, I would just put different layers in my design file. So then that way the SpeedMark software will see it as different layers and then color code them differently, put in different settings for them, different speed passes, different power passes. So my assumption would be different layering in the actual software.
That is considerably simpler than what I suggested. I have a feeling it'll work quite a bit better. So I am curious, and just like we're kind of coming to the end of the hour. So I mean, any more questions, guys?
Already?
Please feel free to throw them. I know it goes fast. I'm curious to ask sort of what, like, if there is sort of one thing that sticks out in your mind, like one particular thing that you've laser engraved, because I guess we alluded to it earlier, and it seemed like something maybe you had a flash of inspiration there for a second.
I don't know. Do you want the safe for work answer or the not safe for work answer?
I mean, I am technically at work, but I mean, I've seen, if you can imagine it, I've seen it pass through a laser at some point or another. Yeah, I assure you. But then also I'm curious to know, like, what sort of percentage, if somebody's interested in getting into jewelry engraving or offering, like what percentage, I mean, you're in a special place. Obviously we acknowledge that because you're at Made You Look like it's a jewelry centered sort of place, but what percentage of stuff that you do each day would you say is like on the laser or concerns the laser? And then what percentage is kind of like, let's say, completely outside of, using the laser for anything?
I do split up my days so that I have like all laser days and all like benchwork custom days. So right now I'm doing 3 full laser days. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm here all day just doing laser engraving stuff. And that's either for our designers. Again, we have a bunch of them in the store that require their own needs for their custom projects, and also incoming people off the, like, just walking in or making appointments with me to discuss what they want. And then 3 days a week, I just focus on just my own custom stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Quick question from the chat too. So Tanya was asking if when you were doing the 2000 cups for the for the distillery, were you doing several at a time, or were you doing them just like one after
Yeah, it had to be one at a time. I thought about, especially for the ones that were flat, like I did a bunch of bottle openers, so they were all flat. Obviously with the jig I can only do one at a time, but even for the flat ones, it just was easier to center and position one at a time. I kind of like built my own framed jig and I just have to plop it in place every time, then make sure that 4 were centered, and maybe if one of them was off, that sucks, right? So yeah, definitely definitely one at a time. But we kind of had a factory line set up for me when I have to do those jobs. So someone unpackages the item, puts it down, I position and engrave, and I put it down. Someone runs the polishing cloth over it and then repackages it. So all I'm doing is just like,
Yeah. I hope they sent you some of their gin too as a thank you for doing 2,000 cups in a row, because that's
I'm
quite
still
waiting. Line. Yeah. I'll go to bat for you on that one. I am curious too. So, as somebody who, you mentioned that you didn't necessarily use the laser when you were at OCAD, but that they had a CO2 laser there. We had, I believe it was Kristen earlier in the chat who was mentioning having a Speedy already, so having the CO2 and thinking about adding, the fiber. What are sort of the limitations as you see them of the SpeedMarker laser? Like, what are the materials that you can't work with, or what are the things that you wish you could do that this particular laser can't? If somebody's like looking at it and being like, oh, I'd love to get one of those, but the galvo is kind of a special animal. Like, it works with certain materials, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, we knew going in what the limitations of the machine were going to be, but obviously we are a niche environment, and we were okay with it being a niche machine as well. But obviously, after like a few years of using it, and now that people know that they can come here to get all sorts of things engraved, it would be nice to engrave other materials that are not necessarily metal. So plastics, leathers, woods. I have tried like really lightly marking wood and leather, and it has worked, but not to any sort of consistent degree that I could be comfortable, saying, come on in with your goods and we'll set it down. But yeah, just being able to do other materials would be cool. But we don't really get any of those inquiries very often, as much as we get metal related things.
Which, yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, another thing to add.
Yeah.
Just because we keep getting more and more non-jewelry related metal items, so larger items that I can't even set the laser to focus on, because it's either too like the
tall,
head doesn't go up high enough, or the object itself is not tall enough, or the bed isn't wide enough, or I can't position it in a way that I can close the lid on it and engrave it. But again, those items are few and far between. I would say 2% of the work that comes in, I have to turn away.
But I have to say, like, it is really great to hear, though, that, I mean, for basically, and again, you're in a very special position. But I would say, the fact that you have kind of 3 full days a week of work that just kind of always needs doing, like, that's always really great and a great sign. And there's nothing we like better in the laser jams than to see like a very deserving business person like doing well. Like, you work really hard, you make incredible stuff, and you deserve all the success you get in the world. 100 million%. Thank
you so much. Well, I genuinely love doing this, and I love what I do, and I think I hope that people who come in and talk to me and talk to the staff about what we do here, they get a feeling for how much we genuinely love our jobs.
I can speak to the fact that that's absolutely true. I'm just I do think, though, one thing, if ever we have a chance to even if it's to loan you guys or to look at getting you guys a CO2 laser to do some acrylic jewelry, I would just be so interested to see the incredible stuff that the designers at Major Look could do with an acrylic laser, even if just like, let's give you one for a week and just be like, go nuts. Like, just
I would be so
excited. I did want to ask, just sort of as we're closing out here too, Tim, really quick question over to you.
Yep.
We had someone saying earlier, what would be the better match? Obviously it, depends on the person, but what would be the better match? Let's say having 2 smaller machines, so one CO2, one galvo, or having one flex machine. what would be kind of your go-to if I said like, okay, Tim, you can have like 2, 100s in your garage, or I can give you like one 360 that's a flex. Like, what would be the go-to? If for anyone who's not familiar, a flex just has both CO2 and fiber in the same machine.
What's up between a galvo and a 100 and just 360 flex?
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh. I would have to say it would really depend on what you're doing. Because I would love a CO2 laser, but I also like the galvos. But there's the limitation of speed to a flex machine, right? Because so a galvo uses a galvanometer system, which uses mirrors and lenses to move around the laser to engrave extremely quickly. And a plotter system is limited by that speed. So if I was doing specifically stuff on the galvo because I needed the speed, I would choose the galvo and the 100, not the flex, just because I would like to see the speed and the results from the galvo.
That makes sense. I think the flex machine is such a special machine because there's a very small percentage of people where having both is absolutely necessary. Yeah. But I'm with you. I'd rather have 2 smaller machines, one of each, than the SpeedMarker CL50. So the SpeedMarker with the CO2 laser. It's pretty sweet.
Keep me posted on that.
Oh, absolutely. There are some great questions too about the dynamic shifting machine and the virtual rotary that Lev was showing you guys. We are going to do some more coverage on that pretty soon, I think, because we're going to be getting ours, I think, pretty soon into the showroom in Mississauga. So once we get it, we're gonna like set Tim loose on it to mess around and have fun. And we'll definitely get you guys some more information about that stuff coming forward. Not to worry, but. Okay, so say I asked for the safe for work answer, Leanne, to close things out. Just supposing, what would it be? Say off the top of your head.
Like I said, my favorite thing to do, that's the safe for work answer. Or the most interesting thing, I guess, is just people coming in very sentimental, important things and asking us to essentially immortalize these meanings and these sentiments into a piece of heirloom jewelry that they can then pass on down to their family. Like, just thinking about the life and journey that piece gets to go on after it leaves my hand is amazing.
100%. I mean, the work you do is amazing. Please, like,
thank you.
I mean, you guys, if again, we said it at the start, I will say it again. If you're not following Made You Look Jewellery and Leanne specifically, it's Leanne Best Designs, right?
Yes.
I think Lev will be able to pop them up, but they were already up earlier in the video too, so you can always check them out. Absolutely follow Leanne and Made You Look. If for nothing else, then even if you're not interested in jewelry, which I don't know who in the world wouldn't be interested in jewelry, but like if you're a creative person and you need some inspiration, these are 2 incredible places to come and just gorge yourself on like cool creative ideas. Also, if you happen to be on Instagram and you're not following us yet, you could. So this particular Instagram account has become a problem at my house because the level of like gorgeous rings on this Instagram account that like the pressure is on for me to choose the correct thing, and I'm very frightened. Do not be surprised if you get a call from me very soon that has nothing to do with this particular stream, but is just to do with absolutely, you guys. I mean, I think the work speaks for itself. I don't need to say anymore, but I think the work that Leanne and the team at Made You Look do is just unbelievable. If you're ever in the Toronto area, I highly could not suggest enough that you go by again, Queen and Dufferin, sort of right at the west edge of downtown. You can't miss it, believe me. Like, even the sign stays true to the theme.
And if it's a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday that you're here, do come say hi to me.
There you go. Personal invitation. Yeah. Doesn't get any better than that. I mean, I want to say a huge thank you to both Leanne and Tim for joining me today, and to all of you in the chat also for the great questions. We really appreciate you guys coming to join us every Friday. Also, again, if you're watching this later on YouTube, huge thank you to you. Leave any questions you have down below in the comments. We will always do our best to try and get back to them and answer them. Leanne, as you've seen, is very generous with her time and expertise and stuff. So I'm sure you could leave a comment on her Instagram and she would probably do her best to get back to you. Yes, thank you so much to Leanne, 100%. Again, you guys don't miss it on Instagram. Check out the store if you're ever in the Toronto area, and come see us in Mississauga too. You can meet Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you again next week with another great stream. Take care, everyone.